Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Sub-Saharan Africa, my article over the weekend was Africa and the vision thing. And I said, where is it? Who is providing it? It is high time we authored it. I said at the time that Prime Minister Abiy of Ethiopia seems to have sketched out a political horizon. But President Kagame did the same overnight. We want young Rwandans and their peers across Africa to remain connected to their countries and each other. We have a responsibility to ensure that young Africans have a real stake in a bright future on their continent. Asked about the political risk in Africa, Orascom's investment holding SAE chairman, this is Naguib Sawiris, said this: right now, if you compare Africa with the European mess or the American situation, Africa is in pretty good shape. I think he's right, isn't he? Ronak, who was also quoted in the article, says African governments have a lot more choice and FDI partners are changing. That's creating opportunities, and policymakers need to be strategic in who they partner. Joseph Kabila in this photograph is shown enjoying time after the presidency. Some of your presidents will never live to enjoy these privileges of handing over power peacefully, says Canary Mgume. And that took me back to the article I wrote at the beginning of the year when I said, you know, he's very cryptic, not prone to engaging with the press, but having anointed his successor, but then subsequently had to pivot pretty quickly, and he did it effectively, was giving exclusive interviews to the world's press. In one interview, he alluded to Schwarzenegger's famous quote, "I'll be back." Indeed, he will. The FT has an article about the Maldives, counts the cost of its debts to China. Crowned with a soaring blue archway, the 4-lane China-Maldives Friendship Bridge loops over 2 kilometers of the Indian Ocean to connect the Maldivian capital with its international airport and fast-growing artificial island of Hul Humale. The bridge was the flagship project in a surge of Chinese investment into the Maldives under the former President Abdullah Yameen, who left office in November after a shock election defeat. While China has portrayed its Maldivian projects as an example of how its Belt and Road Initiative can drive development in smaller countries, the new government in Mali is taking a different and darker view. Saying there were inflated investment contracts which involved personal gain for corrupt Maldivian officials. Maldives has been struggling to establish the full scale of its exposure. Chinese investment boom got underway in 2014 when Xi Jinping made the first ever visit by a Chinese head of state to the archipelago. Beijing's growing interest in the Maldives, despite the country's tiny population, reflects its strategic location. This is the point. With 1,200 islands stretching over a latitudinal distance of 850 kilometers, the Maldives claims an exclusive economic zone of 859,000 square kilometers, well over triple the land area of the UK. Because of that EEZ, China has been typically generous to the island countries, and of course the Maldives is a prize in that geopolitical contest. And I take you back to FOCAC, where Xi Jinping said this in his speech: for those of Africa's least developed countries, heavily indebted and poor countries, landlocked developing countries and small island developing countries that have diplomatic relations with China, the debt they have incurred in the form of interest-free Chinese government loans due to mature by the end of 2018 will be exempted. South African all shares up 2.32% this year. Dollar versus Rand, I told you when it had sort of got ahead of itself around 1340. We're now at 1371.90. Egyptian pound, one of the best behaving currencies anywhere in the world, 17.623. Nigeria's economy accelerated to 2.4% in Q4, but momentum in the non-oil sector remained weak. John Ashbourne, Reuters, Nigerian stocks popped to their highest in almost 3 months, gaining 1.75% after the Statistics Office released the GDP data. According to Charlie Robertson, Nigeria is the second biggest economy in Africa in 2018, using the market exchange rate of 362 naira, but he doesn't have the final South African GDP numbers yet. Or it's the biggest economy if you use the fixed rate. And he also adds Nigeria's GDP slowly picking up since the oil crash of 2014-2016, up 1.9% in 2018, 0.8% the year before, and the last quarter of 2018 was the best in years at 2.4%, but still considerably behind just even the demographic surge. Nigeria ETF got whacked by the 200-day today, but has been on a nice run leading into the election. Worst performing stock market in the world since Buhari came into power, down 50% in dollar terms and probably due a trading rebound. Nigerian all shares up 3.28% in 2019 at a 3-month high. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index is down 3.18%. Ethiopia, despite a 24% fall in investment to $3.1 billion, kept the top FDI spot in East Africa. I've written about Prime Minister Abiy before, and he remains a siren in what he's saying and how is he going about it. Tanzania debt servicing eats up forex reserves by $439 million. The link is on Rich Wrap-Ups. The biggest opportunities to capture consumers concentrated among lower income earners is in countries with tepid inflation, highlighting Kenya as receiving a lot of investor interest. That's a Bloomberg article. Earnings from horticulture hit 153 billion shillings, up 33% year on year. Flowers made the bulk of the earnings, bringing in 113 billion. Vegetables at 27 billion and fruits at 12 billion. 28th of January, I wrote an article, Reasons for Optimism. This is something I had not mentioned, but it's worth factoring in as well. The shilling was last trading at 100.25. And I was going back to my article at the end of January, and I said then every January, every year, every forecast about the shilling predicts a 10 to 15% devaluation. In that article, I said a move below 100 would catch a lot of people off guard. The key levers with regard to the shilling are the price of fuel, we have to write a check every month, inward remittances, which flew off the chart last year, and I think people underestimate the safe haven status of the Kenyan shilling. Nairobi all shares come flying out of the gates in 2019. It's up 14.14% so far this year. NSE 20's up 8.12% this year. Thank you for stopping by. I'm always grateful.